the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, USA Today's NFL Wire site, covering, of course, your Arizona Cardinals. Joining me for episode 789 and the second show of our week, talking about mandatory minicamp, is Seth Cox, my co-host from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site. And minicamp is over, Seth. They had one single practice. That's one of the things we want to talk about, is simply we want to wrap things up in this show about the things we learned at the end of minicamp. And then we want to talk about Michael Wilson, his potential contract extension, the Christian Watson deal, and how that impacts things. But first of all, Mike LaFleur canceled the last day of minicamp. Big deal or no deal to you?
I mean, it's no big deal. It'd be different if, Jacoby Brissett was practicing and everybody's healthy. But the guys that are there have been there for everything else, right? Josh Sweat and Jacoby Brissett weren't going to practice, so they weren't going to get anything out of this. And what ends up happening here is that, again, you're giving the guys a basically a day, right? Like it's not like they canceled a week or anything like that. And even if they did, again, I go back to, if the guys that are integral aren't involved, yeah, you can always get more work for your backups and your twos and things like that. But the reality is, if you're making a decision on Gardner Minshew or Carson Beck starting game one off of OTAs and minicamp, that's probably not ideal, right? Like you probably want to see like fully padded practices and some preseason work before you make that decision. And so until Jacoby, who is, the quote unquote starter, is around, the work isn't going to get done. And I texted you and I joked and I said, well, it's good to see the Cardinals are following Jacoby's leadership and just not practicing, because
correct.
That's the reality of this, right?
Yeah, Jacoby showed up and then, okay, now we're done with practice now that you're here. But I mean, honestly, this is for those of you who are big, hey, why are they canceling practice? They're a bad team. Here's the thing. Canceling or cutting short the last day of minicamp is a thing that coaches do across the league and have done it for years. Jonathan Gannon did it. Cliff Kingsbury did it. Bruce Arians would do it. Well, he would get them out on the field. They would work out a little bit, and then he would leave it up to the kicker, and then they'd have the kicker kick a field goal to cancel practice early or not. And so it created a little bit of fun. I'm sure how it went down today, because it wasn't announced until this morning, is that LaFleur had the guys come in. They had a team meeting. Maybe they got it. And at the end of the team meeting, he told them practice canceled. So it's a bit of good news. I mean, it's a reward. This is something that's normal. There's a couple of things. The Cardinals are going to report to camp earlier than anyone. They're going to report to training camp July 22nd. So they and the Panthers have a week less of a summer break than any other team in the NFL. So they're going to get an extra week of camp. They're going to be in pads by the time teams report. And so they're going to get more work anyway. The guys who have been, like, aside from the injured players and aside from Jacoby and Josh Sweat, they've largely been in 100% attendance with a few exceptions. And so they've gotten the work in. This is simply a way to reward the guys who have been there. And coaches do this for like the 49ers canceled all of minicamp. Like, Kyle Shanahan last week announced, oh, we had 100% attendance this last week of OTAs. We're not doing minicamp at all. And you can't look at the 49ers and call them a bad organization. This is a regular thing. This is a regular tool in the head coach's toolbox for the offseason. It's really easy.
Right. And it's just, again, I get the whole they only won 3 games. I get the whole they're implementing a new offense, but you have to look at it from the perspective of attendance has been almost 100%, as you notated, and participation in this mandatory camp was basically the same about the 100% of attendance in the voluntary offseason workouts. So it was one more day of the same thing for everybody. And that's not to say that it's not an important time, because it is. But at the same time, we're talking a very limited practice, limited amount of practice time. And it was basically a review for those that have been here since May, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. That we did get another little piece of information, a couple of things that's up, and honestly, a little bit of newness. We got injury information. We got some timelines, something we have not been accustomed to for some time. One is news that Garrett Williams, they got good news. Mike LaFleur said when he got there, we're talking like October, November return, which is kind of what we were expecting with the Achilles tear. He won't be ready to start training camp, but soon thereafter, and could potentially be ready for week 1. He's not saying that will happen, but there's a possibility. He said that Walter Nolan is on track to be available at the start of training camp. We also got news that rookie Caleb Proctor, their 4th-round pick, their one defensive player that they drafted, one of the defensive players that they drafted, tore his meniscus in offseason workouts and could miss as much as the entire season. So we get an injury, and we have somewhat of a timeline. You and I joke have joked for years about the way the Cardinals handle injuries, and we've always felt that kind of being a little bit transparent is always good. LaFleur even used the word setback, barring setbacks. Like he's not allergic to that word. He doesn't think it's a bad word, one that you can't use. Like, he spoke about injuries candidly, and the idea of, hey, if a player's going to be out, why can't fans know? Why can't fans know? And why can't fans have a general timetable? And if that timetable changes, why not say there was a setback? Fans understand. What fans don't like is hearing, for example, B.J. Ojulari tearing his ACL in training camp, and then knowing the normal ACL recovery time, him not practicing till mid-season when there was another injury. It's like, if you give that information from the beginning, that goes through. The same thing with Trey Benson. We hear from the Trey Benson, who was on a podcast, who said when he thought he was coming back, and he probably pushed too hard, and he had a setback with his knee and his coming back. And so I like this approach by the Cardinals of giving at least some injury information, which helps fans and media and people like us to kind of build projections for what the team could look like. Injuries you can't predict, but it's certainly easier when you know who is hurt and how long they're going to be out, roughly.
Right. And you look at it and you look at, Garrett Williams comeback. I have my thoughts on it. But from what the team needs perspective, he is a massive, massive part. Gives them what they need from a slot corner. if I'm the Cardinals, I look at him and I bring him back as an outside corner to kind of start, because he will only be 9 months removed from the Achilles tear.
Yeah.
And kind of not rush him back to that slot corner role. But again, that's just me. But as he heals and as he's playing towards 100%, then he can get back into what he's doing. But yeah, I mean, just a little clarity on situations, because what ends up happening is that there's no advantage that's gained, because here's the reality. If Garrett Williams starts game 1, they know he's coming off an Achilles injury, surgery, and rehab. So he's not going to be 100%. If he doesn't start game 1, then nothing changes from what their game plan was. But lying and being like, oh, we don't know, he could be back. We'll see when he's ready, or whatever Jonathan Gannon used to say, right? It's like, that doesn't gain you an advantage. No. Like, they're not going to be like, oh my gosh, Garrett Williams unexpectedly showed up off a 9-month Achilles return. I wonder if he's going to be 100%. Let's just throw the ball at him 100 times and find out. Like, there's just a reality that maybe during a short week you can scam a team a little bit, but the reality is, unless you have a very dynamic, unique player, there's no really game plan focus on that player. And the reality is, like, if you're the Arizona Cardinals and you're game planning for Aaron Donald not to play, and then he plays, yes, you're screwed. But if you're game planning for him to play and then he doesn't play, you should have this game plan to the side that says, Aaron Donald's not here. Now we can run these plays more effectively, right? Like, that's how it is. And it's the same thing, if Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray or one of those guys that is, an elite dual threat athlete, you go, these are the defenses we're calling for Kyler Murray. But if Jacoby Brissett or, back in the day, Joe Flacco is the backup that comes in, we're not running these defenses. We're not worried about him running and escaping. So we're going to call different defenses. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's such a high school mentality of like, hey, we can't let anybody know that our best player's hurt, right? Or our best corner, or our best defensive lineman's hurt, because then they're going to prepare for him all week and that could throw them off. Whereas it's the NFL, it's like they've got 14 people working on a game plan. They don't have one guy that doesn't have any information about, a player on the other team. Like, it was just always such an odd thing to me. And the idea that it was some advantage, schematically, well, that went out the window when you only won 15 games over 3 seasons.
Yes. Coming up next on the Rise of Sierra podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web, we have more to talk about. This is more about Michael Wilson and some news, a contract extension that could be coming this offseason. That's coming next on Rise of Red. We're back on the Rise of Sierra podcast, the Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. The other part of this show that we wanted to talk about, we didn't get to in our other show, but we want to kind of talk about it, is because the Green Bay Packers signed Christian Watson to a 4-year extension, and originally reported as a $110 million extension. That's the max. It is really a 4-year, $92.5 million contract extension. But with the Cardinals looking to potentially extend Michael Wilson entering his final season of his rookie deal, that contract is meaningful for a lot of reasons, because 1, it's pretty expensive, and 2, if you look at the comparisons, but we want to talk about what that's going to look like potentially for Michael Wilson. And two, we'll ask the question, should they even extend him this offseason? I guess we can start with that question. Seth, should the Cardinals extend Michael Wilson this offseason, even though he's eligible and he's going to be a free agent after this coming season?
It's one of those things that you look at and you look at the wide receiver market and you can really say that the way the wide receiver market is, if you got him at true kind of wide receiver 2 price of that 18 to 22 million a year, then it would make sense, right? If you had to go up into that, maybe 25 million-ish that you're talking about with Watson, maybe you hold off or maybe you do it. Like, it's more of a coin flip then. But if Michael Wilson is smart, Michael Wilson doesn't want an extension that's not going to be, closing in on $30+ million a year, because the Cardinals are the ones that are going to have to make that call. Now, I will say this, with the uncertainty at the quarterback position, the new offense, a lot of things, it does usually, and Michael Wilson is young-ish. It's not like he's, super young. And so this might be the one contract he can cash in on. And what I mean by that is like his one really big contract for 4 years, because that would take him into his, age 30 season.
Yeah.
So when you look at it from that kind of perspective, it makes sense for both sides to get something done. But the reality is just that paying a one-hit wonder in terms of, large production, and it wasn't even like huge production. It was good production, but it wasn't like crazy production.
There were he had like 2 monster games, but also
Right.
Those were in blowout losses.
Right. I mean, he finished 18th in yards in the league. I think somebody, I can't remember who, talked about, and I know they're used differently, so I don't want to, I don't want anybody to say I'm comparing, but the contract of Wan'Dale Robinson, I'm trying to look it up, so make sure I get it correctly here. He signed a 4-year, $70 million deal. So right around that, a little below the 18 I was talking about. But only 38 fully guaranteed at signing. That was signed. Was that last year that he signed it? Or no, he signed it this offseason.
Yeah.
And by the way, they have an out after 2 years. So you're talking about a really good contract for the Titans. And if Wan'Dale outperforms his contract, probably a bad contract for Wan'Dale Robinson. But again, you're looking at a guy that broke out a year later in terms of NFL seasons, right? Year 4 breakout, over 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns. But he's only age 24, so he broke out 2 years younger. And again, different type of receivers, I understand that. But that is, if I'm the Cardinals, that's kind of what I'm looking at and saying, like, okay, if I can get him, again, in that 18 to $22 million range, so, 4 years, 80 million, half guaranteed, maybe a little more than half guaranteed, I'm all about that. If he's wanting to start to push, that's where I'm just like, I don't know, man. Because, again, I'm curious what your opinion is. This is a guy that has had one big season, and we are talking about a guy that, has been okay, that has missed a game or more every season except this year. And we always talk about that, right, too? It's like betting on a guy that's had, injury issues throughout his career, and then his contract year, or, the year before his contract year, he's all of a sudden healthy. And then you then you pay him, and then it's 4 or 5 games here he misses, and then 5 or 6 the next year, and then all of a sudden it's half the season, and you're like, why did you pay him? And you're like, well, he gave you that 1 year, and so but again, I'm also of the opinion right now, Jess, and I know this is insanely negative, that kind of what we talked about with Paris Johnson Jr. Like, are we really rushing to pay anybody on this team? Like, that's where I kind of am for this whole team. Like, you can blame the quarterback, you can blame the coach, you can blame whoever you want. But the reality of the situation is that this was a 3-14 team. And so now if we're giving out large, long-term contracts to the guys that help fit a 3-win team, or, help build a 3-win team, or were the best players on a 3-win team, that's where I'm like, okay, what are we doing? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a tough call, especially like Michael Wilson had a fantastic year, 78 catches, 1,006 yards, 7 touchdowns. But here's the thing, 44% of his yards and 46% of his catches came in 3 games. He had the 15-1 for 185 and the 41-22 loss to the 49ers. To Seattle, to the 49ers. He had 10 for 118 in the overtime loss to the Jaguars. That was at least a close game. And then 11 for 142 and 2 touchdowns in that 45-17 loss to the Rams. And those numbers came in garbage time. In terms of the 49ers and the Rams, those numbers came in garbage time. Now, this is not to say that Wilson can maintain that. The question is, can he do so in the role that he's going to be in this year? He's shown that he can't produce much, or doesn't produce much, when he's not one of the 2 most targeted players. Now, if we want to look at, like, he's been solid in all 3 seasons. He had over 540 yards in each of his first 2 years, very respectable, and then had the monster year last year. But, like, if we're looking at Christian Watson, in 4 seasons, Wilson has more receptions. So Watson has 4 years in the league. Wilson has 3. Wilson has 30 more catches than Watson in 3 seasons, in 1 fewer season. He trails him by about 150 yards in 1 fewer season, and he's got 6 fewer touchdowns. I know Watson was the first-round pick. Watson projects a little bit higher, I think, in his usage coming into the next season, but that kind of is the framework. Now, do you do it? Here's the other problem with that. If you don't get him signed, who do you have beyond this season? And I guess that's going to look at, what does the organization see Wilson as? Right. Do they believe in him, or was last year
an anomaly?
Yeah. An anomaly? Like, could he be a solid number 1 for a bad team? Because that's what he proved, that he could be a wide receiver 1 on a terrible team. That's what he showed. There's a lot of good things that Wilson does, but the question is, because if Watson got 23.1 million per year average in his extension, and you look at what Wilson's ceiling season, better than anything that Watson's done, because he's never even reached 700 yards in a season. He's never had more than 41 catches in a season. And so if Watson's getting that amount, you're going to have to pay 25 million plus. That's, you got to, they better believe in him. And maybe in this offense, if they're going to use him in the same way that Puka Nacua, not say he's going to put up Puka Nacua numbers, but if he's going to get the same sort of usage, then maybe that's worth it. Because if he puts together another 1,000-yard season, it's going to push to the $30 million a year amount. I mean, you could always franchise him a year,
which would be around 30 million, right? So,
but it's just an interesting, I guess it's just this year is weird. So unless you believe that, does Mike LaFleur believe that Michael Wilson is a building block for this offense? If so, I guess you go for it. Because if he has a big year and you lose him to another team, then you look stupid again. So I guess there's no real way for the Cardinals to win this.
No, I think the win is what Spot Track has is their market value for him, and that's a 4-year, $72 to $75 million deal. That to me is a win for both sides. The problem becomes, is that something that Michael Wilson wants to do? Again, he kind of is playing it the right way. He doesn't need to be in a hurry, because if he puts up numbers this year, he's gonna that 18.5 million a year is gonna fly up to
25 plus, easily.
25 plus million a year. And if the Cardinals go, you know what, 2 years is good, but 3 years is better. Let's franchise you for, whatever it would be, 28 point whatever. And it's going to change by next year, by the way, too, right? That number is going to be different next year. And if you look at it from that perspective, and he goes, okay, I'll take 31 million guaranteed or whatever that, ends up being for the franchise tag. And he plays well again. Guess what? Now it's 34 million a year for Michael Wilson. And maybe he only signs a 2-year deal. Maybe he signs a 3-year, $100 million deal. And he's like, look at these suckers. I got, 100 and ended up with 135 million or whatever it could be over 4 years, when I would have taken 485, from the start. But they wanted that. From the Cardinals' perspective, if you get him under 20 million, I think you have to do it. From Michael Wilson's perspective, if you don't want to take under 20 million a year, I completely understand that. I would completely agree with that. I just wouldn't do it if I'm the Cardinals.
Right. Like that's kind of what it is. If you can get Wilson under 20 million, deal. But why is Wilson going to settle for anything under 25 at this point? That makes no sense. It makes no sense based on the wide receiver market right now. It makes no sense based on his production. And at least the contract negotiations, any contract talks that are dealing with Wilson or Paris Johnson, there's no drama as opposed to what's going on with Jacoby Brissett. So, but yeah, I think it would be a disservice for Wilson. And honestly, because remember that NFL players don't negotiate deals just on behalf of themselves. They also, as part of a players association, as a players union, are also negotiating deals on behalf of the rest of the players in the league. So if you take a deal under market, that hurts the rest of the players around the league. And so as much as you might want to take a little less, very few people can do that and not, but no, the NFL wants that happen.
Tom Brady, right? You can't do that. And you look at it, you mentioned some of the names. right? Puka Nacua. And yes, Nacua is in his own stratosphere from a talent perspective, but you look at it and you go, well, Puka Nacua wants, 40 million a year. So he wants 3 years, 120 million. But Michael Wilson, who's 75% of Puka Nacua, took over half less than what Nacua, like that. That's how that works, right? And George Pickens and those guys like that are trying to get paid. It's not a good look. And we know that, let's be honest, we know that players aren't going to do the Cardinals any favors. They're just not.
No,
they have a horrible right. They have a horrible reputation throughout the league. And so the last thing that a player like Michael Wilson will want to do is upset the rest of the league to benefit the Cardinals, right?
Absolutely. So yeah, like that's really where it stands. It's a good idea for the Cardinals to wait unless the price point is, Christian Kirk deal from a few years ago, but I get 20 million and below per year. That's a steal because of how the receiver, like even what Michael Wilson is already producing, that's more or less a steal. That's paying for potential plus production. But Wilson probably shouldn't agree to anything less than Watson got. And so, from 23 up to and Watson's max is 27.5 million per year. And so if you're looking at that deal, you're looking 24 to $27 million per year this offseason. And if he has another 1,000-yard season, that price is going to go up. So they either need to do things now, and kind of like with Paris Johnson. And so if they get a deal now that is okay for Wilson, that might not be a bad thing to do. But granted, as you've mentioned, the 1 year production, the over 40% of that production coming in 3 games, that's hard to do. Like you'll see another team do that because they know the role that they're going to put him in. So another team signing Wilson to $35 million a year, they're going to put him in that wide receiver 1 role likely and find ways to do that. But this isn't like the Golden State Warriors in the NBA where you can pay a guy and it's okay to suppress stats because he's playing a role on a championship caliber team. The Cardinals aren't that. And so yeah, like I guess since it's not my money, why not? But the Cardinals would be like, as much as a guy, a player of Wilson's character who is adored by fans in the locker room, one of the quickest ways for a player to suddenly get turned on is to then get a contract that he underperforms. And immediately he will be sort of the villain. Much like Jacoby Brissett, everyone loved, like fans love Jacoby. Now that he's holding out, pretty much everyone's done with him. And that's a sad part of all this is that, granted, if Michael Wilson's sad, he can go to bed and cry with his millions of dollars that he's making. But at least from a fan perspective, it's a tough thing, especially with our fan base, because they have no problem turning on players when they underperform a contract. As long as you're not holding out, and as long as you meet expectations, you're great. If you're exceeding expectations, great. But the second that you have expectations, you can't quite get it. Get him out. He's a bum. Like look at Marvin Harrison the last year and how fans have reacted to him over the first 2 years of his career.
Well, our fans have their thumb on the pulse of everything. Arizona Cardinals. That's why, all the guys that they support continue just to play for 3-win teams every year. So,
yep. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Zero podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk on the web. That is our second show of the week. We should have more content in the weeks to come, depending on the schedule, how that's going to play out. We'll see how that goes. But until then, that's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening as always. We'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be red, see red, and of course, Rise up, see red.